that. We ain't night riders. That. We ain't night riders.
Welcome to the Night Riders Squadcast live stream. You are now rolling with the Night Riders.
All right. Yeah, I was on mute. But we back in the building. I didn't get a chance to do my normal intro because I thought the mic was up. So it's okay. We getting it cracking. Shout out to Luke Conyer in the building. Good to see you, bro. A couple other people in the building. Yeah, so we're gonna have some really hard talk tonight. We had a very, very epic show last week for all of you that could join live. It was an excellent experience. I just talked to Ram behind the scenes, sent me a message, thanked me for having him on the show. He said that it was pretty much one of the best interviews he's ever had. I told him that he helped make it possible. It's definitely a classic. We're going to start chopping it up. We already put an excerpt on the page, so you can go look and take a look at that, check it out. We're going to be putting some other things out there as well from that epic show, and but we do encourage you to go and see the entire thing. I think it was definitely a fire experience. And he said, "What program you use for your graphics?" I'm gonna holler at you behind the scenes because I don't want to give away the secret recipes out. So I'll probably do you come on the shows in terms of speaking, or do you just like to hang in the chat? Yeah, Lucania is asking for the secret sauce. Yeah, I don't mind, giving away little things for people that rock with me, giving away little secrets. Like if you want to do certain productions and things like that. I'm not a gatekeeper like that, but I don't want everything that's out there publicly. So if people rock with me, you just holler at me behind the scenes, shoot me an email, and then I'll give you some tidbits here and there. Yeah, that's how we do it. Because like Lucania, I don't know if you remember this, like last week when Ram and I were talking about how there are people who will literally just come and just take things that we do over here, and these are a lot of cases pretty big YouTubers, and then they don't want to shout people out. I don't even mind if people take certain concepts or things like that, but just kind of shout out a brother here and there, because I know exactly where you got it from. As I showed Ram last week, I showed him the receipts, and he said, yeah, it was basically undeniable. And pretty much, that's the only thing I asked for. I'm not looking to be some guy that's just sitting on everything. Hey, man, you putting people's names out there. I'm not confirming or denying. It's not just one individual, to be honest. There's quite a few, and I'm just showing that I'm not delusional about the whole thing. I'm not one of these guys that try to say everybody's copying off of them. No, for me to mention something like this, there has to be facts and evidence and receipts and tax returns and all of that. So that's how I get down, and I got a stockpile of evidence. So and as I mentioned last week, as I continue to grow and we grow this brand and expand, I may start naming names, but at any rate, yeah, we don't want to dwell on that tonight because we have a excellent show. And once again, just shout out to all you guys that were in the building last week. Those of you who are going to watch this live on the playback, those of you who may be able to show up, we definitely appreciate you. One thing I have not done in a while, and that's because I've been so busy, and I've had some orders come in already, but I have not been pushing the digital utility belt because it's actually getting a little bit more difficult to source certain things, and we're running out of stock. I just got an order from Australia, and it's very interesting, some of the items that they were requesting, and we do have it in stock, but and just for you guys who may not know what I'm referring to, I'm going to put it in the crawl here. We when you go on our Patreon, you'll get access to a link. I own a kind of a survival shop online. It's kind of like it's a hobby shop / survival shop, just a little side thing I do. I got other business interests that I handle, but that's one that I have. I call it the digital utility belt. And I was very interested in an order that I got recently, like I said, from Australia, and some of the items that they were requesting. I'm probably going to make a video about it on Patreon and just let you guys hear that. But at the end of the day, I do want to add value, and I have not been pushing certain things because, like I said, I've been busy, and I don't have the time to do a lot of things that I want to do right now, even though this is something I do allocate some time for. But yeah, I just realized I hadn't put that crawl up in a while, but we're still definitely here to add more value if you're interested. And we definitely have a lot of things to offer over here as well. And we're just, as we continue to grow the brand, we're going to be doing other little things as well. So, but yeah, but once again, shout out to everybody that was able to come into the, visit us last week. It was fire. And as I said, we're going to be chopping up some tidbits from that broadcast as well. But today, as you can tell from the title, we are going to deal with another example of the double standards and a lot of the hypocrisy that's out here. We did a show that we went very deep on about a couple months ago in terms of just how a lot of these type of guys like your R. Kellys and your Diddy's and all these guys who are basically degenerates, they got their start normally because they were fondled with, if you have to be very careful with the language that we're using when it comes to this subject, typically by older women. And we did go very deep. We pushed the limits on that video. So if you haven't had a chance to see it, we do recommend. It's called Behind Every Grape Man, GRAPE. There's a grape woman, or there's a graper woman, right? it's a play on that saying that they always try to push, which says behind every great man there's a great woman. But the inverse is also true. So if you have a lot of guys who are out here degenerates, what I've seen is that if you look into their background, you'll find that a lot of these guys have had uh, certain experiences, for lack of a better word. What did he say? Did he? I think you just coined another phrase, Lucania. I think that's an original, right? I haven't heard that before. I haven't heard that. So yeah, so that was crazy. Yeah, he called it being diddied. Okay, but yeah, so it's a real thing, and a lot of times it's not given the attention that it should be given. And how we're gonna kind of tie into today's show, as you can tell from the thumbnail, we're going to be addressing this issue with this female by the name of Draya Michele. I don't know what it is with these women with the last name Michelle, but anyway, or the middle name, whatever it is. But I didn't know much about this female. I've seen her in passing and certain things. I don't watch any of those goofy shows that she's supposed to be starring in, housewives and basketball wives or whatever. I have not. I mean, I've probably seen 5 minutes, and that's just in clips of those shows since they've been on the air. I mean, I have no idea who's on them, why they're on them, anything like that. So, and like I've said before, typically we don't like to deal with these particular subjects in terms of the celebrity gossip. But when there is something that we can take away from, in terms of adding value by showing you an example and giving context to it, then we do deal with it. However, I was going to do this particular topic again anyway, because like I said, we already did it a few months ago, because I feel that it is something that's being underrepresented. And this just kind of gave an opportunity to deal with it, because once it's in the news and it's kind of on everybody's mind and people are talking about it, and so it gives me an opportunity to go ahead and address it in the way that we do it over here, because as you know, we come from a whole different angle and we give you an opportunity to see things from a whole different perspective. And tonight's going to be a very powerful show, because what I'm going to do is also give you a couple of personal anecdotes. I'm an older guy, so I have a lot of anecdotes, right? I've lived a life, right? But it's going to be very relevant, and you don't want to miss what I'm going to reveal in terms of that. But what I want to do is just kind of speak a little bit about this whole concept of older women getting with these younger guys right as they're reaching the wall, or in her case, she was on what's, I guess, considered the second or third wall, because I think this woman was damn near 40, if I'm not mistaken, and this particular young man is 22, I think. I think I heard he was 21, and then I heard he was 22. But this is a phenomenon that people don't realize happens a lot more than what they would care to admit. Now, obviously, when it's in a high-profile situation like this, where you have a semi-famous person uh, of her ilk, it kind of gets a lot of press. But what does not get a lot of press is that this is an ongoing, pervasive thing, specifically in the so-called Black community. I'm sure it happens in other communities as well. And in fact, I did a video on my main channel titled "Are Women the New Faces of SA?" And I basically just showed a reel of clips of examples of these teachers who, and if you look at them ostensibly, they looked as though they could have gotten men in their own age bracket, because they were not bad looking. Some of the ones that were featured, they were not, uh, necessarily my type, but I could see that how other men may find at least some of those women attractive. In that video, it was a consistent thing with a lot of these women that were in these high schools and so forth, and they were getting into these relationships, and a lot of these women were married, some were not, but it didn't even matter. They were dealing with these high school guys, and I'm sure those of you may be aware of instances where there have been teachers. Maybe when you were growing up, you heard rumors of women teachers messing around with certain guys, and so forth. And I know I have heard or even been on the receiving end of advances. So, like I said, I'm going to touch on a couple of things a little bit later on in that regard. But this is a whole cultural thing, and we're going to kind of focus for the sake of reference. We're going to be dealing specifically on how it relates to the so-called Black community and how there's a culture of older women who, for lack of a better term, are basically just preying on younger guys, and it's a cultural phenomenon actually, and they kind of just brush it off like, oh, well, this is like a coming of age type deal where these younger men are basically seen as uh, just a means for these women to kind of rejuvenate themselves, as is the case with this Draya chick. She was literally at the end of her life cycle in terms of reproduction, but yet she found a way to get her powdered eggs fertilized or watered, as you see in the thumbnail, by this young virile man. And I want to point out something. I have a clip because, like I said, I didn't know much about this chick. I did a couple little searches to find out just, something about her in terms of her history. And I was, I wouldn't say surprised to notice that she's kind of been passed around in the industry, and which is the case for a lot of these chicks. Surprise, surprise. But I'm going to show a little reel of some of the men that this woman has been with. And you guys tell me if some 21-year-old guy who's just kind of starting out in life needs to be hooked up with the likes of a female like this. So I'm going to show that real quick and give you guys a nice little reel. I may have to mute it because I think there's a track on it. I don't know if it's copyrighted or whatever. So it's just a little short clip, but I'm going to play it because I want you to see the the extent of the men that this woman has been associated with. Because, like I said, I had no idea um, what her history was, but I can't say that I'm overly shocked that she has the mileage on her that she does. So let me go ahead and cue that clip up, and then we're gonna get back to it. Hold on one second.
We came from nothing to something, nigga. Hey. I don't try nobody, grip the trick. Nobody call up the gang and they come and get gang. Cry me a river, give you a tissue. Bad and bullshit.
So there you have it. At least 11 guys, right? And these are the guys that are high profile, not to mention all the little sneaky links or whatever this woman has had. She has almost as many guys as this guy in terms of age, years on this guy's life. So that is crazy. And I don't know who this guy's parents are or who is supposed to be in his corner. But yeah, I think his name is Jalen. I don't remember his last name, but he's I guess an NBA player, young guy, just starting out life. But look at that woman's track record. They took it back to I think 2010, and it showed how many guys she's been through, or have been through her more appropriately. And there's no way in hell that I would let any son of mine deal with a woman like that. I would forbid it 100%. But before it even got to the point where he would even be entertaining something like that, then we would have had that man-to-man talk, where, especially given his status and knowing that the chicks like that would be looking to get with him in terms of the fact that he's going just even before he went into the NBA, there would have been preparations made so that he would be on the lookout for stuff like that, and that anybody who came within contact would have to be vetted. There would be no situation or no circumstance where he would be able to get accosted or approached by something like that. It's just insane. And the fact that this woman is just kind of promoting it and just talking about it as if I saw one video. I didn't get a chance to snatch it, but she was pretty much just trying to frame this whole thing like it was some blessing and some throwing the how they do like want to make it all flowery and like it's some great thing when it's horrible. And it in every situation that a child is brought in is not great, right? Contrary to popular belief, they always try to frame things that just because a woman's laying down and pushing out a kid that somehow that's a good thing. No, it's not always a good thing, especially in a situation like this, because it could go bad very easily because this young man is just now starting out life. And I remember when I was his age, um, I know for a fact that I would not had been ready to be in that type of situation. Uh, I mean, back then I was really focused on what I had to do. Now, I was in a relationship with a woman that was younger than me, so that was something I was able to do. But an older woman at that point in life, where you're just kind of trying to figure things out, and she's already more seasoned and got a lot of manipulation and all of that, that's not a good place to be when you're just starting out life like that. So I could just see it ending badly. Just like all her other relationships, apparently, and she's had quite a few. And it's very interesting that of all those men that we just showed in that clip, none of them decided to wife her up or, you know, do anything serious with her. And I do understand that she already has children, one of which I heard is basically his age, which is even more crazy. So the whole thing about this situation is, and I'm going to expand the conversation away from just these two individuals, because what I want to focus on, because like I said, this is just um, the thin end of the wedge where we want to take situations like this and expand the conversation and show how this is more than just a one-off. This is a something that permeates the entire culture, and we're going to deal with it because a lot of people don't want to talk about it, but that's what we do over here. We deal with those subjects that people try to brush under the sweep under the rug, and we pull that rug away from the pile of debris and garbage that they're trying to cover up. So let's talk about it though. Let's talk about this idea of an older woman who is essentially at the end of her fertility, and she decides that because of her failures to be the type of woman that a man thought was worthy to marry, or because her standards, such as they were preventing her from getting that match that she should have gotten when she was younger, because she was focused on her feminism and getting the bag or whatever, or being a hoe or whatever she was doing. And then she gets to this end of her fertility cycle, and just as those eggs are starting to powder up, she decides that she's going to take a young man in the prime of his life and get pregnant by him. Now, I know the opposite side of this argument is, well, he could have pulled out and, he could have strapped up and or what have you. So, okay, I hear that. But the problem with that is that women are supposed to be the gatekeepers, and they are the ones in this society that have all of the control with regard to themselves getting pregnant and who they get pregnant by. As the saying goes, men control relationships, but women control sex. Especially when the dynamic is between a younger man like him, because she's literally old enough to be this guy's mother. So you cannot put the onus on this young man, specifically when it comes to this dynamic, because she's much older, much more seasoned. And that to me would put the responsibility squarely on her. Now, again, that doesn't absolve him of anything in terms of his responsibility, because like I said, I don't know who his people are. I don't know like, I don't know if these guys are supposed to have like some type of chaperones or agents or somebody, even if it's not their family. Preferably it would be their family or father or somebody or guardian that would have schooled them to the game. But unfortunately that didn't happen, because this woman, I mean, it took me about 5 minutes, just to, or less, just to figure out, what this woman was about. And I didn't know much of anything about her. And I'm sure that these people who are supposed to be around and protecting this young man and his assets, they should have been a little bit more vigilant in terms of knowing who this woman was and giving some type of interference so that she couldn't come around and do this. So it's crazy to me. But we're gonna go a little further into it, but I think I have another clip I want to show, just to kind of highlight this culture of these older women who are basically taking advantage of these younger guys. I'm actually going to play a clip from one of the featured videos that I have on my main channel on this high school teacher. This I think she was a coach, a black woman, and what she did. And we're gonna, look at this quick clip, and then we're gonna get back to the conversation. Let me cue this up real quick. Oh, you know what? I think it's not taking that one. Hold on one moment. I think I got another one. I may have another one about this particular Draya chick. I was trying to load the one that I have on the main channel as well. But oh, you know what? Let's deal with just this woman's I guess one of her claims to fame in terms of what she does, because again, I didn't know what she did or why she's famous, but she's one of these kind of materialistic type women, and I think she's just showing clothing or something. So I'm going to play a quick clip of that real quick. So let me cue this up.
Video is sponsored by Fabletics. All right, so new month, new everything. Let's just jump right into it. This set I love. This is called the Cloud Seamless set, and basically you get these amazingly comfortable high-waisted pants, which are so cute.
Okay, so she's like a booty model or whatever. But I'm showing this to show what this woman's about. I mean, she's getting on the internet, in her lingerie or whatever, and she's, I mean, that's what she does, I guess. And so, I mean, with her in the history that she has, there's no way that a guy in his 20s should be dealing with a woman like this. But let's get a little bit more. Like, it's kind of freezing up. Hold on one moment. Yeah, StreamYard, they need to get better at being able to play clips.
They also have this cute little kick split in them, like a little, give you a little detail. And I love this outfit because it's super cute. I love that it's cheetah print. It also comes in plain solid black. And basically, I mean, I wouldn't wear this outfit to work out, but I would wear this out. So I would say with a little cute cropped jacket, and if you wanted to accessorize this with a little,
yeah, so I just wanted to show that to give you guys a little bit of context in terms of what this woman's about. She's basically an airhead, like I said, a booty model. Nothing to see here, just more of the same. But the thing that's what I would say is detrimental is having this type of female who can manipulate and weasel herself into the life of a young man who should not at this stage really even be having a child, to be honest. I mean, let's keep it real. And he certainly shouldn't be having a child with the likes of a woman like this. But once again, let's talk a little bit about this whole concept and how accepted it is, and the hypocrisy, because if this was a reversal and if there was a 40-year-old man who just knocked up this up and coming young 21, 22-year-old woman, oh, it would be all kinds of caterwauling and screaming from the rooftops and calling them all kinds of pervs and this, that, and the third. And we know it. But my question is, where are those same type of women when the shoe's on the other foot? I'll tell you what they're doing. They're cheerleading it, telling her that you go girl and all of this, that, and then they're giving their approval, and they're also showing their hand in revealing the fact that they would do the exact same thing. And I've only saw, and I have not done a lot of investigation on this because I simply don't have time. But from what I was able to gather, the vast majority of the women who have covered this particular story have been in favor of it. I've saw maybe a couple of women who are actually, and when I say a couple, I mean literally maybe like two or three that were speaking out against it for all the reasons that we're kind of highlighting tonight, in terms of how inappropriate it is for a woman with of her mileage. Now, my main, it comes down to this for me. Even if there was still the same age differential, it wouldn't be so bad if she has not been around the block as many times. Let me be clear. Just say if she was, kicking 40 in the ass like she is right now, 39 pushing 40, right? And just say she had never had a child, or she has not been, with so many different men, and just say she was kind of a prude and she wasn't out here being a booty model and what have you, and there was a young man, and then somehow they met and there was some type of mutual interest and they kind of fell in love a traditional way. She didn't rush to get pregnant. They were just, or let's say they were in a relationship for a while and then ultimately they got married or something like that. I could kind of rock with that. But it's just the sleazy way that this is done. How this woman sat up here, kicked her legs open for this young dude, let him skeet all in her. And like I said, he, being inexperienced, ain't no telling what she done put on him, right? She got all kind of tricks and backflips, and she's, to me, she's kind of funny looking, but I can see why somebody would say she's attractive. She has a nice body. She looks kind of like a velociraptor a little bit. The way she's shaped kind of funny. She got a real long neck, and I mean, maybe I'm just being kind of picky with her, but maybe I got different tastes. But I'm not saying she's bad looking. I know a lot of guys will go for her, particularly this young man. But the thing that's more unattractive is her baggage. All the fact that she's already a 2 or 3 time baby mama. She's been around the block, like I said, so many times, and she just comes off as an airhead bimbo who's just trying to get the bag. And again, I don't know who's in this young man's corner, but he really needs a lot of help, because I can see this going bad down the road. Because at some point he's going to look around and he's going to see a lot more hot women that are closer to his age, that probably are still fertile and all this, and he's going to want to make a change. He's young and impressionable now, but at some point as he gets older and she gets older, and that long neck she has starts to get saggy, he's going to start rethinking his life decisions. But anyway, that's for him to find out. Now, what I want to point out here, because like I said, we're going to bring this conversation back to a more meaningful discussion, because we're going to talk about how this is a cultural thing, and how so many, unfortunately, Black women have created this subculture that it's okay for them to prey on young impressionable men. And like I said, it gets so bad that it's even boys who are not even mature yet, as we brought out before when we did that other show, which again I'm going to refer you back to it, called Behind Every Grape Man There's a Graper Woman. And we went and showed examples of how a lot of these women are taking advantage of these young boys and creating the degenerates that they want to complain about later. So again, go check that one out. But this particular situation, we're kind of taking it to the next level to show that these women, even when they're not the outright uh, pervs that are dealing with these underage boys, there's a culture of dealing with younger men in these huge age gaps, and it's totally acceptable. Look at that book that woman made called "How Stella Got Her Groove Back," about how she went down to Jamaica, and what was the name? Terry McMillan, I believe. We all know that story, right? And the guy turned out being a little fruity, but I would be willing to wager that that particular boy was probably taken advantage of too, because a lot of those little Jamaican boys, a lot of these women, such as this female right here, they fly down to Jamaica and the Caribbean, all these other places like Gambia. There's a whole big thing about that being out here right now, and they're taking advantage of those guys. And a lot of these guys, they get turned out early, and then that's what Terry McMillan found out. She went down there, thought she had a little, play a boy toy, but turns out that the guy liked playing with boys himself. But that's neither here nor there. However, we want to look at the fact that this is a cultural thing, and that's the narrative that I want us to hold on to, because this is not a one-off. This is something that happens a lot. And I told you earlier, because I'm not going to hold you guys long because I have some things to do, and we know we did a marathon show last week, which was 3 hours. So we're just going to try to keep this show at about an hour and some change tonight, because like I said, I got some other things to do, but we're going to hit it hard. And I'm just kind of getting into this next gear, because what I'm going to do for you now, as I said at the outset, is that I'm going to give you a couple of anecdotes, because I always like to do that to bring context and to show you that a lot of the things that I like to talk about, actual data and facts behind it, or in many cases, it may have been something I've seen with my own eyes or have experienced. And when it comes to this particular subject matter, I am here to tell you that it is real. And when I say that there is a culture in Black women's society that they prey on younger men, I ain't telling you what I think, I'm telling you what I know. And based on that, I am going to give you some anecdotes. I have two that I'm going to share with you in terms of my own experience. There's more than that, to be sure. So let's be very clear about that. I have way more than this two examples personally, and if I were to include some of my friends, right? In terms of this whole dynamic, when we're growing up, being exposed to older women, right? So let me give you two examples. The first example was, I was about 16 years old. Now, both of these examples I'm going to use, it was around the same time frame. So I believe I was either 16 or 17 respectively when these two events took place. So I remember that's when I first started working, because I always like to have my own stuff, even though I was still living at home. But, I didn't want to have to depend on parents for everything. So I like to dress a certain way and things like that. I like to buy my own clothes, and I had nice little taste, so I didn't mind working. Um, Even though I had plenty of people who loved me that would have bought me things that I liked, but I always had the mindset that I wanted to do things on my own, and I saw a lot of freedom and independence on doing that, and it was a good thing for me to do to get the experience. So I started working this little job at a department store, working in the stockroom while I was in high school, and I would buy my own clothes and things like that. And if you know anything about Chicago, there was a certain dress style that was there called house. And even though back then they had the starter gear and all of that, I was more refined in my taste. I like to wear the nice slacks and the nice shirts with the, the steppers and all of that. So I had a nice little style to myself even back then when I was in high school. So I always kind of looked a little older in terms of my maturity level and how I styled myself and how I carried myself, and the fact that I was taller, right? And it's like I spoke to Ram last week, and we were talking about this thing about height a little bit, and I told him when I was younger, I always wanted to be shorter because all of my friends were shorter than me, and it's kind of awkward, you know. And you never really want to be the odd man out, if all your friends are a certain way, you want to fit in, right? So I was always the taller guy, and I felt like, I was, looked at like I was hanging out with younger kids, and some of my friends were my age or older, but I always kind of stood out. And then when we got into it with people, I was always the target, right? So I got adept at fighting more than one assailant at a time. So that kind of helped me inadvertently, but that's a story for another day. But the point is, when I was younger, I wanted to be shorter because I looked, people thought I was older, but as I'm older now, people think I'm younger. So that's kind of weird. But when it came to interacting with women, I realized later on that it was an advantage being taller because a lot of women would gravitate towards me because of that reason. But when I was a young man, like I said, I was about 16 years old. There was a lot of, I noticed that there were a lot of older women who were looking at me, right? And I was, a young man, so I didn't have the foresight, obviously, or the understanding that I do as a grown man. I would say I was game goofy, but that's not even fair because, I was a kid, right? So I didn't have the experience to know when women were kind of angling or positioning themselves uh, for certain things. So let me give you, as I mentioned, a couple of anecdotes about older women um, coming on to me. I had a friend, and he lived right around, like around the corner, but down the block from where I used to live, and we went to the same grammar school, and we became pretty good friends real quick, and like I said, we started hanging out when we were in grammar school. I would go over to his house, he would come over to mine, and we stayed in touch. We went to different high schools, but even then, because we lived, relatively close to each other, we would still hang out, even once we went to different high schools. So at this point, like I said, I was working, start buying my own clothes and all of that. So I would come over, and then, I would have my little outfits on or what have you. And his mom was always very complimentary to me, right? Oh, well, you look so dope. Oh, he's so cool, blah, blah, blah. And it was, it was just nice. It wasn't anything that I, took note of in terms of, but I just know she was always very complimentary to me. And it was funny because a lot of my friends used to tease me because they would say that I would get certain treatment that they didn't get, right? It'd be, I'd be offered certain, you know things to eat, or I'd be allowed to come over at certain times and things like that. And one of my friends would always tease me and make it seem like I was smashing somebody's mom. I was like, no, man. But it was like an ongoing joke that we had. But anyway, in this particular situation with this particular friend, as I mentioned, his mom was always very complimentary to me, right? And again, it was cool. They were always because, like I said, I would be over there a lot, especially when we were in grammar school, and then even when we got into high school, although not as much. But long story short, one day I went over there, right? This routine, I just kind of go over there. We never really even had to call each other. If we were around, we just would just pop up over each other's house whenever. So I come over, and his mom is there, and she answers the door, and she's wearing like some nightgown or what have you. And his mom's not a bad looking woman, but she answers the door, and she's kind of smiling at me. I got my little outfit on or whatever, and smelling good. I always like to wear a nice little cologne and all of that, right? Even though I was like 16, 17 years old, I was coming into my manhood in terms of my style. So she answers the door. I'm coming over. I'm of course looking for my friend. Oh, it's so and so home, and she didn't say anything. She just kind of let me in. So I'm thinking, okay, he's there. So she opens the door. She just kind of motions me to come in. So I come in, and she there's when you go into their place, there was a living room, right? So that's their living room. They got a couch right there, and then there's a dining room and so forth. It was an apartment, like a two flat. If you know anything about Chicago, you have those brownstones or those two flats, right? So they're on the first floor of this two flat, and you walk in, that was their living room, and they had the couch sitting over there on the wall. Like I said, she has this nightgown on or what have you, and she goes and sits or lays back on the couch. So I'm standing there, and I'm thinking, okay, I'm here. I'm thinking that maybe he's out taking out the garbage or what have you, because I'm wondering, because she let me in essentially. And so she's kind of smiling at me, and then at some point I asked her, I said, "Oh yeah, where's?" And I say my friend's name. I say, "Yeah, where? Is he here?" Blah blah blah. He said, "Oh no, he's out with his father or whatever, wherever he was, right?" So I'm like, okay. So I'm standing there, and I'm like, kind of, it's kind of awkward because I'm like, well, I'm in here, and she's in here, and we're just in here together, and I don't really quite understand at that point why she let me in if he wasn't there. Because like I said, you can call it game goofy or whatever, but I'm just over there to see my friends. So I'm not putting at that moment, I'm not putting two and two together. So I pretty much, after some awkward silence, I just kind of say, "Oh, okay, well, could you just let them know I came by?" And she's just kind of looking at me, right? She's just kind of got this little smirk on her face, and she's kind of looking me up and down. And I'm like, okay, well, just let them know I came by, and she's okay. And she was just kind of, it's almost as if she was waiting on me to make a move on her. And I didn't quite get it at the time because, again, I wasn't all that experienced. I'd done some dry humping on some girls and some touchy feely type stuff since grammar school, but I wasn't like that young guy because I was kind of raised different. I wasn't the guy who was just trying to smash girls and because some guys were already trying to get girls pregnant at that point. But thankfully, I was raised right, and I wasn't quite as experienced during that time. But I had to have my little experiences with women or girls, as it were. But I wasn't ready for something like that. So, and again, when it first happened, I wasn't even really putting two and two together in terms of what she was doing, because she was in this nightgown, sitting on her couch, looking me up and down, smiling. She let me in when what should have happened was that, "Oh, he's not here. I'll let him know you came by." And I should not have even been let in. I didn't figure that out until later because my whole thing was, well, I've been coming over here for years. She knows me. We're good. So she just let me in, right? But little did I suspect at the time that she liked me, and that, if I had a made a move on her, she would have been with it. And for any of you who think I may be jumping to conclusions, there are other examples, one of which is a story for another time. She actually groped me. She actually started feeling me up at one point. But again, that's a story for another time. I may have to put that on Patreon or something because it's kind of graphic. Not in a bad sense, but it was kind of weird how it all went down. But anyway, yeah, this same woman. But this was the first instance where I was in that situation. I had that first inkling that there was something going on. But again, I'm a kid. I'm 16 years old. I'm not putting two and two together until later, and I figured out. And then that other incident happened where the woman basically started groping me. But anyway, I just use that as an example to show you that there's this culture of women who, whether it's their friend's son or just some young man that they have access to in the form of maybe their teachers, their whoever, they have this authority over these young men. And this happens all too often in the so-called Black community. And in my particular instance, it was pretty shocking once I realized how pervasive it was, because as a kid I had these I was very protected. I didn't have um women who could easily access me. But when I had a situation where I had a friend or someone like that and it was his mom, I would run into certain situations like that. And there have been some instances at school where there were teachers kind of, saying certain things or kind of touching you a certain way. And, I do remember that. But that's one example. Because like I said, I could go a little further, but for the sake of time and for the sake of this conversation, I didn't want to dwell too much on one particular instance. Now, the next anecdote, just to underscore this overall point about how pervasive this is and how long it's been going on. Because, like I said, I'm a 51-year-old man. This was going on in my time when I was 15, 16-year-old as well. And I do have friends that have their own war stories in terms of how they had basically, to varying degrees, been dealing with it. I have one friend in particular who was basically doing the damn thing. If you know what I mean. He was basically knocking down people's moms and so forth. But that's a whole nother story. But this next anecdote that I have is around the same time as the first instance that I told you about. Because, like I said, I believe I was still 16 at the time, and that job that I told you about, I was working it. And what I would do is that I would, once I finished high school, I was in high school, but once school was over and I finished my other little activities, because I believe at the time I was also on the wrestling team. But whatever, I would go to this to my job, afterwards, and I would work there until maybe, because I think school let out about let's see, maybe 3 or something. If I didn't have practice for the team, then I would just go to work. But I would work from, I think, maybe when I got there about 5 or 6 or whatever, until maybe I would close the store, because it was a department store. But anyway, I was I finished up my shift, and I was on my way home. And for anybody who knows Chi-Town, we have what's called the L, right? You have the elevated train, right? You've seen it. In fact, in that video that we did last week, in the intro, I showed some of the L trains, right? It's classic Chicago, right? You'll see the trains on what we call, it's an elevated track, but we call it the L. So I got off the bus, because what I would do was, the particular route that I took, there was a bus stop, and then I would take the bus, and there was an L track right there. So you could either hop on the train or you could walk. I would always walk, because I was just a few blocks from my house. And so what I would do is just take the alley, right? I didn't care. I mean, I grew up in these areas, so I wasn't scared to be at night. I'd be walking down the alleys, and it was just a shortcut for me. I'm not, I'm very comfortable anywhere in Chicago. So that's why it's always funny to me when I hear people talking about how scary they are, how scared they are to be in Chicago. I'm like, well, I'm not scared to be anywhere in Chicago. So even walk around at night, I'm at home. I'm comfortable. But anyway, because I've been doing this since I was a kid. But I'm walking through this alley on my way to my house, and then I would go back on the main street once I got closer to home. But once I hopped off the bus, I would just walk along where this L track was, this elevated track, and I would be walking down the alley, right? So I'm walking, and I get to a particular boulevard as I'm crossing over, but I'm still in the alley, but I'm near kind of a lighted area at that particular point, because there's a main boulevard here. And all of a sudden, I hear this honking, right? It's like somebody's blowing a horn. So I don't think anything of it at first, because I'm like, oh, whatever. People are always honking horns. But they keep doing it. And I realized, and I think they start flashing their lights as well. And I knew at that moment that it was geared or directed toward me. So I'm like, what's going on? So I'm like, is that one of my friends, or, somebody who knows me? So I'm like, okay, let me see who this is, because they kept blowing at me and so forth, letting me know that it was for me. So I walk over there. Now, granted, I was always taught from a young man that you don't get into the car of anybody, right? Even when I was a little kid, my parents were telling me, look, if anybody says that they are there for you and you don't know them, don't get in no car with nobody. I said, we gonna come pick you up. If there's something going on, we gonna make sure one of your relatives, right? That's how strong my family was. I was one of those kids where, the parents, put that key around your neck, right? I think when I was like 9, 10 years old, I had to, the little necklace they give you with your key to make sure that you never lose your key. I remember one time some dude tried to hit me in the chest, and he hit that key because it was right there. But anyway, that's a whole other thing. He hurt his hand, but yeah. So I was always well protected. So I always was told very good things to be safe and never get in the car with anybody. But, like I said, I wasn't scared at this point. I was 16. So, and I was, built pretty nice. I was kind of tall. I was on the wrestling team, so I could protect myself. So I felt comfortable enough to walk over to the car just to see, even though looking back, that probably wasn't even the right thing to do. I probably should have just kept walking, but whatever. So I walk over to the car. Inside of this car are 4 women. 2 were older women. They were all older than me. They were all not bad looking. In fact, the 2 in the back were pretty good looking. If I was 16, I would say the 2 in the back were maybe in their 20s, and the 2 in the front were maybe in their 30s. So there was just four women, black women, of course, in the car, and they were smoking weed. Now, I didn't smoke weed, but when I came over to the car, they rolled the window down, and I got that that whiff of the weed, and so I'm like, I almost probably got a contact high from all the weed they were in there smoking. So they were basically trying to get me to get in the car with them. Now, let's be very clear. At that age, I was still highly interested in women, and I was tempted to get in that car. They were telling me, "Oh, go ahead, get in," even though I didn't smoke weed. But the women, they were in there kind of looking good, right? And I think what had happened was they were in there just smoking or whatever, and they had got hot and bothered or whatever. And I guess I was the the man on the spot, and they just saw me walking, and I guess for whatever reason, because I still had my little smock on, when I was working in the stock room or what have you. So they were like, "Oh, there's a nice young buck right there," and so they wanted me to come on over and join them. So I did go over there, and again, I could just hear it in my mind, "Don't get in the car," right? But at the same time, I was conflicted, even though I didn't, like I said, I didn't smoke weed, but they were just very persuasive to try to get me in there. So we kind of went back and forth a little bit. They kept trying to tell me. I was like, nah, nah. And then ultimately, I was just saying, well, I got to go to school tomorrow and this and that, which was true. I should have had my butt already at home by at that point, but took that little detour. And so I just remember the fact that how vehement they were to really try to get me in the car with them, and there's no telling what they would have did because these were 4 older women. Because, like I say, even the 2 that were in the back who were younger, they were still older than me and undoubtedly more experienced. And there's no telling what would have happened had I gotten that car, or they probably would have eventually got me to smoke some weed. They probably would have been doing a reverse train, if you will. All of them probably would have got a piece of me or something. I don't know. Uh, could have been a setup. I don't know. But what I do know is that left me conflicted. And later on, I would tell my friends about the experience. And, I thought about it. I was like, this would have been a hell of a story if I would have gotten that car, and who knows what would have happened, right? But I had to be honest about the situation, which was I didn't get in the car, although I was tempted. And I had, needless to say, some of my little boneheaded friends were like, "Man, you stupid. You should have get, man, I'd have got in there talking about what all they would have did," right? I'm like, okay, well, that's the difference between me and you. And then one of these knuckleheads, he wound up getting a child while we were in high school. So that shows you that he probably would have got in there and probably knocked up one of those broads. But that shows you our different levels in discipline. But anyway, that to me exemplifies the culture, right? Because these women should have known that I was young at that point, because I didn't even have any facial hair at that time. I'm sure my voice wasn't as deep as it is now, and I did tell them clearly that I was in school. So I remember telling them that. So even if they thought I was older at the time, because like I said, I can excuse that because I'm tall. So when they saw me, they might have thought I was a grown man. Who knows? But I would think that they probably didn't think I was a grown man, because if I was a grown man, they probably wouldn't have wanted. They probably wouldn't have did that, because I think they wanted a little boy toy or something. Because a grown man maybe been a little bit too dangerous for them. So to be honest, I think that they knew from the start that maybe I was a younger guy. But certainly when I got over to the car and I started engaging with them in the conversation that we did have, And I told him certain things such as, yo, I gotta go, I gotta go to school tomorrow, so I can't get in, and this and that. Making my my own little lame way of trying to turn them down or what have you. But it was crazy because they were really trying to get me in that car. And I say this to say, number one, this is a true story, but number two, look at the dynamic, right? And if you were to reverse that role and you have four men, just say you got two in the back, they're in their 20s, and two in the front, they're in their 30s, right? And you got a 16-year-old girl, and the same dynamic happened. What do you think would have been the narrative, right? Oh, they trying to grape that girl. Oh, they trying to do this and that. Oh, they would have been the worst dudes in the world. But that's an actual situation that happened to me. Like I said, when I was 16, the fact that you had these older women, and if I was a little less cultured or raised right, if I didn't have parents who taught me to not get in cars with strangers or to be more responsible, I would have gotten that car, because even with all of that, I was tempted. Because like I said, these were not bad looking women. And they were in there and they were, very much in, kind of, trying to get me in the car with them. But just like some of my friends who I told the story to, they said, man, I would have got up in there. They would have just jumped in the car. So how many situations were like that where the guys actually did get in the car? Or, even though I didn't get in, some other guy may have came by later and they probably saw him, and they probably, some other young man, 15, 16 years old, probably went in there, and who knows what happened, right? But to me, that is an example of the culture. So you have this dynamic where these girls or women, in this case, were just sitting around smoking in a car, and they didn't think anything of bringing a young man into their situation. It wasn't no, oh well, we shouldn't be, trying to influence this young man who, probably doesn't even smoke, which I believe I even mentioned to him. Oh, because I think they were even trying to offer me a hit at that time of some weed, and I was like, nah. When they, at least when they saw it, I wasn't ready to just jump in the car. I think at one point I remember they were trying to offer me a toke of the weed, but look at that level of irresponsibility. So these were supposed to be my elders, right? Because like I said, the women in the front, I would say they were the one driving and the one on the passenger in the front. I would say that they were in their 30s for sure. And the ones that are in the back, they were younger, but they were at least in their 20s, I would say. And here I was, 16 years old. So what does that say about the culture that you have a dynamic like that could happen? Because again, once I reverse the roles and you see four men in that situation trying to coerce a young 16-year-old girl to get in the car with them, you immediately see the predatory nature of that, right? You immediately see that this could end very badly, right? So why is not the same level of outrage given when it's a younger uh, man, such as I was during that situation, when there is still a large amount of psychological damage that can happen? There's still a lot of things, like I said, you as a young man, you can wind up getting a woman pregnant. Because like I said, let's look at my situation. If I was not as disciplined or raised right as I was, and let's say I got in that car, and one of those, just say the younger ones, we start doing something and I wind up getting her pregnant or something. Or worst case, I got two of them pregnant, right? Who knows? Because they were high or whatever. And then I probably would have got high just from being in the car with all that weed smoke going on. It could have been a disaster. So here I was, 16 years old, and then somehow um they could have put me on child support because I had a little job at the time. But I'm just just kind of mapping this out to show you, even though I was a guy and people would try to say, oh well, you're a guy, yeah, that's the way you become a man and all of this, that the whole machismo thing. Well, check this out. I wasn't prepared for any of that. I'm still living at home with my parents at the time. So what would I do, with two kids from two different women because of a night of passion, right? That would have ruined my life. And I probably would not have been able to go ahead and do some of the things that I was able to achieve in life, because I probably would have got hobbled right out the gate, right? So that's what I mean. Now, in this particular guy's case, this guy that's with this Draya chick, at least he's in the NBA and and all of that. But look at all those men or young boys who get into these situations and they don't have those resources. They don't have all of that, and they still wind up getting their lives derailed from whatever greatness they could have done because some banshee decides to put her claws into him and then takes him off his course. So people don't talk about that, but that's a real thing. You'll talk about how some older man can, impregnate a younger girl, but let's look at the dynamic. That's a better outcome, to be honest, because if just say if that man does it and he's in a position where he can take care of it, take care of the child, then that's a normal dynamic. Because throughout time immemorial, older men have been getting with younger women, and there's a structure that works better, right? Because it's it's the responsibility of that man to take care of the child. In a situation where it's the younger man, then he's still responsible. He can still get put on child support because this older woman can still do that to him because there have been instances where that has happened. So that's what I mean. It's even more predatory when you think about it, even though it doesn't have the same level of stigma. It should, because you are literally ruining this young man's life when he gets involved in a situation like this. And again, with this particular example, with this Draya chick and this NBA player, that's a little extreme of a case in terms of the resources that are involved. But think about it from the standpoint of everyday people, where you just have some guy just is working some little odd job or what have you, and then he gets manipulated into a situation, and a woman gets knocked up by him. How about that, right? Then it's not as easy to digest and say, oh well, he can manage, he can take care of the kid and all of that. So I do believe that we need to be a lot more balanced in terms of the outrage, right? Instead of this selective outrage when you have an older guy with a younger woman, which is a more normal dynamic, and it works better than an older woman who, as I mentioned, those eggs are powdered, and she's just looking for some water to put on those powdered eggs. And typically, a lot of them will want to get a younger man because an older man, we're more hip to the game, and we're not interested in dealing with all that baggage. A younger guy who does not know the game and who is just captivated by the fact that this woman might have her own things. He's used to dealing with girls or women his age who don't have a lot, and they're always looking at him as a lick and saying, oh well, you need to do this and that. She may have came at him with a whole nother game where she wasn't even asking him for much because she has her own thing, because she was just sinking her fangs and her claws into him slowly but surely. And that's why he needs people around him to put him up on that type of stuff, because I'm sure that was her approach. She didn't come out the gate with a whole lot of begging and things like that. She just kind of, eased on into it and made sure that she got pregnant by him so that she doesn't even have to come with a lot of demands, because by virtue of the fact that he's the father of her child, he's on a financial hook. So that's how that works. And that's what a lot of guys miss, a lot of these younger cats. But for me, I still can remember the impact of some of these experiences that I had with some of these older women. And at the very least, thankfully, thank the Most High, I didn't, go ahead and get any of them pregnant. But, I've dodged some bullets. And to this day,
this day, to this day, to this day.
Been a while since I used that, so I had to throw that in there. So to this day, I still think about how I dodged a lot of bullets where I could have my life could have went so bad if I had just made just the wrong choice. And like I said, these are just two anecdotes. I have plenty. Those are just two examples, with one of my friend's moms and that particular situation that I avoided in terms of those women that were in the car, and how who knows what could have happened had I got in there, up to and including my physical safety could have been in jeopardy, or I could have impregnated one or a couple of those women in there, because, like I said, it was a kind of an irresponsible dynamic, because there was, albeit, weed is considered a, you know, I guess a safe drug, if you will, but it's still a drug, and there's no telling if it was laced or not. I mean, I didn't know about any of that at the time, but I don't know. They could have been lacing it with something. They could have gave me something, whether it was something in the weed that they were smoking, or they could have gave me something, an extra package, if you know what I mean. Not just a kid, but some type of STI or something. Who knows? I don't know. But thankfully, I had the presence of mind not to go along and get into that situation. But think of all the young men who were not raised like me, who could have got into that situation. Because again, I'm not going to front and act like I wasn't tempted, because I was. And I could have very well got in that car, but I didn't. But what we're dealing with here is a predatory culture that does not get called out for what it is. And this is just an example of it. And when you look at the comments of a lot of these women in this situation, a lot of them are in favor. They're popping their collar. They consider it a win. And their hypocrisy and their degeneracy is showing through and through. And that's the type of thing that we need to call out. And that's why I like doing shows like this. And shout out to you guys watching live right now. And for you guys who are going to watch the playback, I want you guys to just kind of keep this type of stuff in mind. And if you got younger men that are under you that you can influence, tell them about women like that. And, I think unfortunately there's this culture in the Black community where it's like, oh yeah, man, a lot of older guys are encouraging younger men to get with these women, and they're basically praising them when they have an older woman that wants to get with them. And I think that needs to change. I don't think that that's a good thing that Black men, because I got to get on us a little bit too, right? Because I'm talking about the culture of Black women and how this is all acceptable, this level of degeneracy. But the other bookend of this is that a lot of Black men consider that a rite of passage as well. Because, like I said, I can, I can tell a whole lot of anecdotes about guys who I know who went ahead and did certain things, and how it turned out. But I think it's incumbent upon us to talk to the younger men and to try to let them know that that's not a good thing to do, and that they need to be very careful with these older women, and that they need to make sure that they're vigilant and they protect themselves, and don't think just because she's coming around you nice and complimentary that she doesn't have ulterior motives that can be very detrimental to you in your development. And I think that it's always good to take some younger men under your wing. I did that, when I was living in the States. I would be a part of mentor programs, and I would help a lot of young men. And I always made it a point to talk about things like that, not just because of my own personal experiences, but I knew that at least some of those young men were probably either experiencing or going to experience some of the same things, because I understood that this is a pervasive cultural thing. And when you have guys who may develop any level of manhood, like we all know those guys who their voices may be a little deeper than normal. They may, grow a mustache a little faster than other people. They may be a little taller, or whatever the case is. Anything that can remind a lot of these these drying up egg banshees of manhood, they pretty much zoom in on that. They I've been around those type of older women. Some of them, they may have not had uh the dating experiences that they would have liked. They may have not been as successful because they may be a little bit overweight or what have you. Those old maid types, right? And they see a young man, and if that young man in any way, shape, or form reminds them of an actual man, they're gonna try to sink their claws in him. I've seen it firsthand. It doesn't matter. You could just be dressed in a certain way. You could, be a certain height. Again, your voice could be a little deeper than what your age would suggest. And these women, they angle and they put themselves in these positions to where, you know, as a young man, you can smash them basically. And if you don't have a right upbringing, and if you're vulnerable or easily suggestible, you could find yourself in a pretty bad situation where you can either knock this woman up or just become some type of boy toy, and it will kind of ruin you for a normal relationship. And that's another part that people don't talk about, which is the psychological part of it. And that's why some of these boys need counseling once they experience things like that, because I've had to do that. I've had to counsel and talk to young boys after they had been taken advantage of, and in many cases, it may be from another older man who was also uh, taken advantage of by either another man or a woman, and it typically uh, happens like that. And so you talk to these young guys and you just try to, and a lot of them are just really desensitized, and they don't know where the boundaries are. You just have to kind of talk to them and try to reestablish certain things, because unfortunately, when they've experienced these things at such an early age, their sensories or their sense of values have been distorted. And that's one of the worst parts of this. And people think it's some type of victimless crime, and it's not. It really is severe in terms of the psychological damage they can have. And to me, that's the tragedy of this whole thing, that is kind of treated as if it's no big deal, and people kind of laugh it off and do all of that. And it's like what Lil Kanye just said. He says, like I said, he coined a term here, diddied. And if we all know how degenerate he is, but when you look in his history, he pretty much, had that situation just like with R. Kelly, where there was an older woman that pretty much did some things to them. And again, I'm not going to say that single-handedly may have done it, but it's a contributing factor. And from what I've seen, one or two things normally happens when things like that happen to young men, where there's an older woman taking advantage of them in particular, because the dynamic when it's a man that does it, it's a whole nother dynamic. Typically what they will do is become rainbow, but when it's a woman, then they become over sexual, or both, but when it's an older woman that takes advantage of a younger, impressionable young man, then he typically has a distorted sense of sexuality, and he normally becomes very hypersexual. And we know of all of the situations that come about at that, such as the multiple baby mamas and all that. So you see where I'm going with that, right? You see how this becomes a cycle, and a lot of the same things that people like to complain about in terms of how, in particular, black men are operating, and how they're, for those guys who are over sexual and they're going around impregnating everything that's not nailed down, then that comes from somewhere. And oftentimes it comes from these over sexual experiences that they've had with older women. I've seen it firsthand. And thankfully, I didn't succumb to it, but the opportunity was there multiple times. So it's kind of a miracle that my life kind of went the way it did, and I was not put in, you know, I mean, I was in these situations, but I was able to get out of them, you know, relatively unscathed. So that's the good part about it. But even with that, I noticed that even in my psyche, there's certain things that there's certain impacts that it still had. Because like I said, I just gave two quick examples, but there are more, and there are some that are a lot more graphic in terms of some things that because like I said, and I kind of alluded to it earlier when one of these older women just basically started groping me, right? But that's that's a whole nother story. But anyway, yeah, like I said, I'm not gonna hold you guys tonight. Shout out to you guys that are still in the building. And yeah, I did want to touch on this because it is very important. I don't like the fact that from what I've seen, there are a lot of women congratulating this. There are a lot of women basically popping their collar to this, and they thinking it's a flex. They think it's good. But once you put the shoe on the other foot, then somehow the hypocrisy comes out, and they see how bad it is for a man. Like in her case, she's damn near 40, messing around with these younger men. And again, I'm not one of these prude type guys that don't understand human sexuality, and sometimes you can't control who you're attracted to. And like I said, if it wasn't for the fact that she's been such a bust down and been ran around the block, ran up and down and through the block so many times, I wouldn't necessarily have as much of a resistance toward it if it was like on some genuine, they just kind of met, and even though she's older, she may be still on the same level with regard to experience, then I can rock with it. But I can't really rock with it if she's a bust down and she's still, messing around with this young dude. That to me is predatory because she's way more experienced. And women, and let me hit you guys with this. I've said this before, and I'll say it again now. Women should not be really experienced like that because experience is for men. And I know some of you are going to say, "Oh, you're being toxic. You're being that's toxic masculinity, or you're being a chauvinist." No, check this out. When a man goes through something, he becomes experienced. When a woman goes through something, she becomes scarred. And there's a reason why wars and things like that, which still have an adverse effect on men, are mostly dominated with men because we're better able at dealing with certain traumatic events without it having such a detrimental impact on us psychologically and physically and so forth. So therefore, when we have certain, whether it be negative experiences or what have you, we learn and we get stronger. Women typically, as I said, instead of becoming experienced, they become scarred. And this woman is clearly scarred because what type of psychological profile would it be for a woman who's already a baby mama, already has a son around the same age as this guy, and she's been with all these men? Like I said, I showed the clip earlier, but yet she sees something in common with this young man. It just doesn't add up for a very stable minded person. A woman who's stable, who has a right type of mentality, would not be so predatory as to want to bring her baggage into the life of a young man like that, unless she was totally just, as we pointed out before, histrionic. Because typically you should be looking at this as like, this guy just starting out his life. He has a right to go out and start a new family and get a someone a little bit more on his level with regard to experience. And again, that transcends the age thing, because even if it was still that age differential, if the woman didn't have as much experience, then it could kind of work. But this woman's been all through dragged up and down through the block. And once again, I'm going to play the clip just to highlight it real quick, just to put this back into perspective. I'm going to play this clip one more time. So just one after another, one after another. So this is this woman's resume, right? And this is the guys. These are the guys I guess we know about. And some of these guys, they got around themselves. So if the saying is true, is that whoever you slept with, you sleeping with who they slept with as well. And then this woman got like a 1,000 bodies just based on what we're looking at here. So they stopped counting at in 2020. So I'm sure there have been more since then, right? So that came to about 11, right? So it's like she's jumping ship with every year she's with a new guy or less. So there's no way in hell you should have a young guy who's with something like that. So like I said, the takeaway I want you to have from this gentleman is that if you have in any way any type of influence, I don't care if it's a nephew, definitely if it's your own son, but if it's nephew, a young man that you may just see on the block that is willing to listen to you, you may be a mentor, whatever. Make sure that it's part and parcel of what you're talking to those young men about, that you are teaching them about these powdered egg women who are looking for someone to throw some water on those powdered eggs. And you have to explain to these young men that they can do a lot better, and it is essential for them to live their life without a woman who already has a bunch of baggage, because it's in the long run, it's going to be a negative. Now, in the beginning, it may look like they're winning because they get to have this older woman who's more seasoned, and she may know some tricks and some things, and and all of that. And the fact that she's probably not on the front end asking for a lot, because she does a little booty model thing or what have you. So she's probably not as thirsty for money, at least up front. But in the back end, yeah, you best believe, yeah, she going, especially since she got that kid coming. Yeah, she's gonna be hitting his pockets. But you got to tell these young men to watch out for situations like this. You got to circle the wagons if you see that he might be going through something like that, and just kind of as much as you can. Now, again, I know it's very limited because a lot of times the hormones do the talking, and some guys are not going to listen. But at the very least, you can at least put the information out there, kind of like with me, doing this show, just putting this out here, right? And maybe even if it just reaches one person, and a young man, he comes across it and he realizes that this is not all what it's cracked up to be, and it can actually have a bad ending if he's not careful. And just giving them an opportunity to see it from a negative standpoint, because so many times the culture is pushing this as a positive, and it's not really telling the full story, right? So I think it's incumbent upon us, those of us who are integral, who have honor, we need to let these young men know that it's not glamorous. They need to watch out for these type of women, because it could definitely have a very, very negative impact on their life, or whatever things that they want to do. Because once it goes bad, now it's all lovey-dovey in the beginning, right? But once it goes bad, those women can be very vindictive, very vicious. They have, and like I said, the fact that she has her hooks in them with this kid, she can start using that kid as a weapon, because at some point he's gonna, like I said, when that gizzard neck that she has starts sagging, he's gonna start looking for something younger and hotter as he gets a little older, and as she gets older, and guaranteed that's gonna create some friction, and yeah, it's probably gonna start going bad. But at any rate, thank you once again, you guys, for showing up. I appreciate you. Thank you for definitely showing love with these little shows that we do here. 'Cause like I said, it's basically cathartic for me. I just like to somehow at the end of the week come out here and unwind, and just give you guys a little taste of what I'm uh you know observing out here in these streets. And this was one thing that came across my desk, and I just had the need to talk about it, because again, I am very much interested in broaching this subject, because I think it's not being talked about enough, and I had planned on dealing with it again anyway, and this was the opportunity to do so because of this particular story. And once again, you guys have to be clear that it's not a glamorous thing to see this culture of these old shriveled up women who are trying to get those powdered eggs watered by these younger guys, and it just creates a lot of havoc. And it's a generational thing, because even the children that come out of those types of situations typically are affected as well, because again, there's a lot of things that are going on that can be negative when it comes to that can kind of create this legacy as well. But once again, we're gonna wrap up, because I don't want to hold you. We're what, an hour, almost, yeah, hour and a half in exact. But it's been cool. I hope you got something out of this particular live. I told you we're gonna hit it. I know I may have said some things that may rub some people the wrong way, but again, when when do I ever not say those types of things? So you should be used to it by now. You've been tuning in. But if anything, I kind of tried to keep it a little bit reserved, because I could have went in, but I don't want to get flagged again, because I've already been flagged over here before. But anyway, once again, thank you for joining us tonight. and we're gonna wrap up. Oh, you know what? I gotta update the end credits because we got some people, showing love. So, like I said, we have this little thing where, when you contribute a little bit, we put you in our end credits, and we appreciate you. We don't, necessarily promote it a lot because I've already budgeted for these type of productions. But it's always good for you to show love, and we appreciate it. No matter how you do it, hitting the like button, coming through, making your comments, coming to the lives. It's cool. Glad to see you, but we're gonna keep bringing that heat, bringing that fire, and we got some other good things coming up as well. But at any rate, I'm gonna end the way I always do. We're not just a podcast; we're Squadcast. There's a very big difference. Mission complete. Over and out.